Um, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. And I guess first thing that I wanted to kind of go over was just a little bit about me and kind of my winding path to into RevOps, just so that everyone knows kind of where I've been, where I've come from. So my first job out of college was actually as a CPA, a public accountant. And after that, I got into corporate finance. Then I went into business school. Then I tried management consulting a little bit, then back into corporate finance. Eventually, I started my first company back in 2017, was in the legal technology space. I later shut that business down, or as I like to say, pivoted to not existing. And then after that, I joined another early stage startup as a VP of BizOps, where I was kind of responsible for revenue operations. That was really my first kind of foray into the RevOps space. That company later got acquired by Microsoft, and then now I'm kind of working on my second startup, of which RevOps Co-op is a part of that. And so for those of you, I've mentioned a little bit, but given how kind of relevant RevOps is to the topic here, just a little bit about the community RevOps Co-op that we run. So it's a global community of folks who are passionate about revenue operations. We now have 9,000 plus members from 3,500 different companies and 44 different countries represented. We have a variety of membership options, including a free membership. So for anyone who's in revenue operations or passionate about revenue operations, the RevOps Co-op is definitely a great community, and we've got lots of activity going on in there. So we'd love to have you kind of join and be a part of it. But onto the topic at hand a little bit. So as we think about, or as I was thinking about kind of revenue operations and really the RevOps revolution and where we've been and kind of where we're heading or where we can go next. I think the next logical place that RevOps is going to go, or call it transform into, or even just have more of a focus on, is really on the customer or customer operations. And the reason why I believe that is, well, there's a couple of reasons, but I guess first I want to talk about some trends that I guess I've been a part of kind of in the past, and why I think kind of something similar is happening within kind of RevOps and revenue operations. So I mentioned my first startup that I started back in 2017. It was in the legal technology space. We were building a timekeeping application for lawyers that was powered by voice technology like Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri. And I think the reason why we started building in that space, and also the reason why a lot of people started to get really excited about voice technology, was that it was one of those things that was going to kind of transform the way that people did business. Everyone looked at the current way that we were doing things and interacting with technology, right? Kind of a lot of probably what we're all doing now is sitting at a desk, using a keyboard, going to a tab, typing stuff in, right? Having to do a lot of this, call it unnatural kind of navigation. And things like voice were really appealing because we're all humans. We all talk to each other. We've been doing that since before technology existed. And so it seemed like this really great way to truly transform the way that we did business. I think it turned out voice wasn't necessarily the right medium for that, but everyone here, and I think whether you're on the consumer side or the business side, everyone here has heard of ChatGPT, OpenAI, and the way that, one, that's just making, providing a much better interface for us to interact and engage with technology. And every single application out there, every single software product out there is looking at how they can incorporate generative AI tools like ChatGPT into their own product solutions so that their users and consumers can adopt and engage with their products in a more, call it, natural way. So that's just one example of a kind of a prior trend that I saw. And then the last, I mentioned how I was early employee at Ally, OKR startup that eventually got bought by Microsoft. When I first joined Ally, I was familiar with OKRs and knew what they were, but when I kind of went and I asked my wife or my family, no one even knew what OKR stood for. But to me, it seemed really obvious that Every company on the face of the planet should have goals, objectives, things that they're trying to accomplish, and they'll need software to eventually accomplish those things. And I think between Ally, a bunch of other kind of companies and startups in the space that are building really big companies or getting acquired, I think those things have kind of proven true over several years. And now a lot of us are probably familiar with OKRs and other goal setting framework. And so I bring that stuff up because I really see a similar kind of similar trend happening in revenue operations. And my GIFs aren't working in my slides, but what you would see Michael Scott from The Office doing here is kind of signaling that you complete me. And I think that's really what RevOps does for any company or for any organization. Is it is the glue that connects your end-to-end revenue engine together, your entire go-to-market motion. It completes the process. And without it, you have silos, you have teams that don't talk to one another. You have a lot of challenges, but I think RevOps does a really good job of, again, connecting the end-to-end revenue engine and really completing the process. But up until now, I think there's been one really big problem, which is kind of RevOps has mostly ignored the biggest portion of our revenue base, or your revenue base, which is your customers. So if we think about where revenue operations got started, I know when we first kind of entered the space and even started building our community about 3 years ago, I had asked a lot of VCs, other people, if they knew what revenue operations was or if they'd heard of revenue operations. And majority of them had not. They didn't know about these new teams that were getting spun up. But kind of that trend has really started, and I think kept going and has only grown, especially globally and worldwide. But if you think about RevOps and probably where it started, the focus was on, essentially the connection between marketing and sales. How can we break down those silos? How can we, get those teams on the same page? How can we, get everybody aligned on driving kind of revenue? But if we think about kind of two critical kind of metrics when it comes to SaaS and software, one of them is revenue growth, right? So just like some very basic examples here, if we look at how as a company do we grow our revenue base, let's just take two really simple examples. Example A, we keep all of our customers year over year and we sell $20 in new business, right? If we started with 80, we end with 100, we have 25% revenue growth year over year. That's great. Now let's take another example where we start with 80 again, but we lose half of our customer base that we have, but we still sell the same $20 in new business. Now we have a decrease, right? We've gone down by 25%. So I know this is very kind of basic math, but I think it's very clear that in order for you to grow your revenue base, you need to keep your customers around year over year or period over period. And let's look at one more kind of critical metric for any SaaS company that's out there, kind of net revenue retention, net dollar retention, whatever kind of variation of this that you want to look at. But just look at the formula there in terms of things that it incorporates, right? Starting recurring revenue, expansion revenue, churn revenue. Look and tell me, where does your new business or your new customers, where does it play into this metric? And the answer is that it doesn't, right? But what does, right? Every single one of these things on here is impacted by your current customer base. And so if all of these critical metrics like revenue growth, net dollar retention are all really driven by your current customers, then why are we spending so much of our time and so much of our energy focused on new business, top of funnel, marketing and sales, when we know that the way for us to grow and really expand our business is to keep customers around and to make sure that they're happy and to expand them, right? Revenue retention, revenue expansion. And so this is one of those things that, has kind of led me down kind of that same path as before, where again, all this seems very kind of logical, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where I know in my past role at Ally, for example, so much of what we were focused on was marketing and sales related. Even when we had our kind of weekly or biweekly kind of stakeholder reviews, we spent so much time like between the VP of sales and the VP of marketing really getting prioritized with all the things that they needed. And then, there was our customer success team over there who was like, oh, they've got like Asana and, like they're doing their own things. Like, we'll just kind of leave them up to, whatever it is that they're doing. But, we're missing out on such a huge element of our business. And so kind of last thing that I'll kind of bring up here, this is the last slide that I have, is around kind of where you can start, where RevOps can start when it comes to the post-sale process. Because again, we talked about kind of why your current customer base is so critical, why RevOps needs to really help to influence things that happen post-sale, right? That our job is not simply done once a deal is closed won, but we should impact and influence things that happen after people become our customers. And so I put down just a couple of thoughts in terms of, where RevOps can start when it comes to the post-sales process, things that you can do to influence things post-sales and, help drive influence, positive movement in some of those kind of metrics that we mentioned before. So the first thing that I'll bring up is first impressions matter, right? So in RevOps, one of the things that you can do is look at the process that happens from sales to CS. What happens when we mark a deal as closed won? How does the handoff occur? Is it manual? Is it automated? Is there room for improvement there? Are there templates that can be built? Should we have an automated email go out? Do we need to first route this to the head of customer success so they can assign a CSM? Actually look at that process and just figure out like, how can you standardize it, right? How can you automate what makes sense, leave things manual where they make sense? And then also, what does the implementation experience look like? Because this is really going to be the first impression that your customer has with you as a customer, right? Up until now, they're happy because your sales team has sold them, their problems are getting solved, they're excited, right? They finally get the deal over the finish line. Everyone's in a great mood. But now is when kind of the rubber hits the road, right? And so look at the implementation experience and again, kind of figure out what does that look like? Where can we make improvements? And this doesn't all need to be software or technology related. So, look at it and say, do we even have a documented implementation process? If not, let's document what that looks like. How can we track kind of critical metrics around the implementation? Things like how long does an implementation take? What's the key milestone to get people to experience value? So actually map that stuff out and then make sure that your team there obviously has the tools, the technology, the things that they need to do that successfully. So that's one thing I'll bring up. First impressions matter. The next is in RevOps, actually understand revenue recognition. And what I mean by this is not like how large was the deal, what was the total contract value, what's the ARR, but understand revenue recognition from like a finance and accounting standpoint, meaning like, what do you need to do to actually be able to recognize revenue on your books? I'll tell you right now, just getting a deal signed is not enough to recognize revenue, right? So understand those things that drive revenue recognition and then look at the things that you can actually do to influence that or to impact that. And there are things that you can do to help there. I brought up the implementation experience before. One of the things that you can do in RevOps to help impact revenue recognition at your company is actually accelerate the go live time to be able to recognize revenue faster. So this can vary a lot depending on the type of software company that you are. But if one of the things that you need to do generally in order to start recognizing revenue is actually deliver, some usable product, right? You got to give your customer something that they can actually like log into, put their hands on, be able to use. And so if you have a really big product or big solution that does require some sort of implementation timeframe, Your finance team typically will not be able to recognize revenue until you have, some milestone completed, right? Where it's like, okay, your customer has access to the product. They can start to get value from it if they log in. That's typically going to be a time when they can start to recognize revenue. So look at what that is and then figure out how can you move that up, right? Is it possible for you to accelerate, call it the go live time or whatever that milestone is? Because let's say your timeline is 90 days, 120 days, whatever it might be. If you can cut that down by 30 days, you've now moved revenue up by 30 days, by a month, right? That can have a big impact in things like growth rates, NRR, those other critical metrics. So actually understand revenue recognition, and even understand the formula I showed up here before, right? Like net revenue retention. Like know how to do this math and then look at the things that you can do to impact that, right? So expansion revenue, churned revenue. What are the strategies, the tactics, the things that you can do to help drive expansion revenue? For example, if you have a process or you don't have a process in place today, look at, how can you figure out, what a customer looks like that's ripe for expansion. Who should be the one to identify that? Is it customer success? Is it the sales team? If there is a customer that's ripe for expansion, who should be the one to own that? Does the AE make the sale? Does the CSM make the sale? Then what does the process need to look like within kind of within your systems, right? To be able to raise a flag when those things happen, to make the handoff, to make sure that plays get run accordingly. These are all things that RevOps can impact. But again, they all start with your current customer base. So understanding revenue recognition and finances is another critical component. And then the last two items on here are really around like, what does a successful customer look like? And what does a typical churned customer look like? And so what I mean by that is if you look within your current customer base or any software technology company out there that has product market fit, that has sales, that has current customers, you are sitting on a whole treasure trove of data about what a successful customer looks like. And so there's some probably very basic things, very basic data points that you have today that you can start to evaluate and measure and actually compare then against your pipeline, your prospects, and help your new business team, right, to actually be more efficient and more effective. So, one of the things that you could do is just start to, look at company characteristics for all of your successful customers, all of your current customers, right? How big are they? What's the typical revenue range? What does the industry size look like? Geography. Just start to actually map those things out, look at the median of all of those things, look at the average, and then start to actually compare those back to, again, your pipeline or your prospects or the people that you're marketing to and reaching out to. That can really help to influence where you place your time and energy and just make sure you're doing it in the most efficient and effective way. And then you can do the same thing on the churn side. So look at all the customers that have churned. And again, start with current with company characteristics, right? So what does a successful company look like? What does a churned company look like? What are those company characteristics, product characteristics that churned customers have exhibited that you can then apply against your current customer base to determine if there's anyone in there who looks similar, right? So if you've got outliers on a churned customer versus a successful customer, look within your current customer base to understand who fits some of those company characteristics where they may not be a good match or they may not be a good fit, and do the same thing on the product side, right? And then what can you do to feed that back in so you can look for opportunities for intervention? This is where process technology can come into play, and RevOps can really influence how to do those things effectively. But the key thing with this, whether you're looking at your successful customers or your churn customers, is like, don't stop with the analysis, right? This is only going to be valuable if you actually do something with the data, with the insights that you gather. So close the feedback loop, work it back into your process. Like I said, if you're evaluating what a successful customer looks like, work that back into your top of funnel process so that marketing and sales can evaluate who they're marketing to and who they're working in their pipeline to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success. And then your CSM or your CX team can do the same thing when it comes to churned customers and what those look like, right? But you can't stop with just saying like, oh, a typical churned customer looks like this, exhibits these company characteristics and these product kind of characteristics. That's only going to be helpful if you apply that data and apply those insights back against your current customer base, right? So you can take action, determine where you need to intervene. So those are a couple of the, call it the low-hanging fruit, or I guess the places where RevOps can start when it comes to the post-sales process. And that was all that I had for y'all. So, feel free if you've got any questions, happy to answer them now. I've got my information up here as well. Email address. You can also, if you get into our community, I'm in Slack, you'll get Slack and Slack DMs and emails from me as well. So happy to continue to chat in the community over email or over LinkedIn as well.
Great. Hi from me, Matt. Great presentation, great insights. Just interesting to understand. Do you still hear me, Matt? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just several questions from my end, because you have a lot of exposure to different trends that are happening right now in revenue operations in the US and in Europe. Interested to understand in terms of the demand for RevOps professionals, the different RevOps roles. What are those roles that right now are being searched a lot, but there aren't enough professionals? There isn't enough, skilled professionals.
Yeah, so a lot of we have some resources on this as well, but a lot of the one of the biggest opportunities, I guess, right now is on the Salesforce administration side, at least in terms of open roles that we see, and kind of salary potential as well. And then there's also a lot of I'll say like RevOps analysts and RevOps manager roles that are open and available. And so these are going to be more kind of entry level or individual contributor type of roles that we're seeing. But SaaS companies and software technologies are definitely the ones that are lead charge in terms of forming RevOps teams, or kind of doubling down on the RevOps teams that they have. So those are some of the things that we're currently seeing in the market.
Great. And something that I asked one of our previous speakers as well, because you have exposure to both the US and the European market, a lot of people say that the needs for revenue operations are different when it comes to European companies and US-based companies. Do you have any view on that, how you see things?
Yeah, I would say I don't think that they're different. And I guess, I think the way that companies in different geographies operate is certainly different, but the need for a RevOps team, I think, is the same, regardless of where you are, right? Assuming that all of these companies have revenue and they value revenue and revenue growth, and they're trying to grow, then a RevOps team is going to make sense for them. Now, the same way that things differ industry by industry, things will differ country by country and geography by geography, and that's one of those things where a RevOps person operating at a SaaS company in, say, Germany or France or London, may have different experiences or different challenges that they face than an operator or a RevOps person in, say, the United States. But ultimately, they're trying to accomplish the same thing, right? Which is alignment,
right,
revenue growth, doing what's best for the business, and how to really ramp up their go-to-market machine.
Right. Great. Maybe one last thing, if we have time, Ivan, just to understand Matt's position.
We are perfectly on time.
Great. There is debate, discussion around if there is any best moment to introduce revenue operations at your organization. Some people say it's around 8 to 10 million of ARR. Some people say it's like around 2 to 3 million, because you need to start instilling this culture and mindset that revenue operations promotes. What would you say about that?
I think you should do it as soon as you can. And I'd say, I mean, I would say that with any new, or not any new, but like any discipline that you want to apply within your company, mostly because the more, like the larger you get, the harder it's going to be to change. And so, for example, like for everybody here, problems that you currently have today at your business, those will not magically go away. So in a year, if you continue to grow, those problems are still going to be there. And now, do you think they're going to be easier or harder to solve for? Right? They're going to be harder because now they're going to be bigger. There's going to be more there to unwind. And so the earlier that you can adopt the discipline, the better. That doesn't mean that you need to go out and like hire a whole team right away. Like I'm a big believer of like, just figure out a way to do things manually or with the current resources that you have. So it doesn't mean you got to go out and buy technology or hire a whole bunch of people, but RevOps at a discipline should exist at every single company on the face of the planet, whether you have 2 people or 200,000 people at your company, and look at it in terms of a discipline that you can instill. And eventually you'll get to a stage where, like everything else, things start to break. You need to hire someone to kind of focus their energy on it. But even right now, like within RevOps Co-op and our current startup, I mean, we're a small team. I'll say we have a RevOps discipline for sure. That responsibility mostly lies with me, but I try to instill it in everyone else in the team as well. And when the time comes, we'll probably need to hire someone whose job that is, and it won't be me anymore. But for now, right, it exists within our company, even though you wouldn't find a dedicated RevOps person. So that's my thought on kind of adoption of the discipline, if you will.
Great. All right. And maybe one last thing from me. Right now, we're talking a lot about the wave of artificial intelligence, automation, and I mean, every profession, every role probably is going to undergo some kind of transformation. How do you see the transformation of revenue operations given all those technological advancements in the next, several years? For example, how are we going to look at revenue operations and revenue operations people will need, let's say, in 2030? What's your take on that?
I think with any new technology, a lot of the kind of the place where we all kind of go automatically is on the, call it the solution side, which is easy, right? Because you start to look at all the things that this new technology can do. But I think the main thing to look at when it comes to how it'll impact revenue operations or any other profession is going to be start with the problems, right? So what are problems that folks in RevOps have today or that they're faced with today? And then what are the potential solutions to those problems, and where does AI now maybe fit into to that solution landscape? The answer to those questions will look very different now than it would have a year ago when we didn't have all this buzz around ChatGPT and OpenAI. Yeah. But you can't skip that step. So you can't say like, oh man, all this OpenAI stuff is really cool. Like, what if you could just tell a robot to build you a Salesforce workflow and it would do it? That's maybe a great solution, but what's the problem that's solving, right? Maybe the problem is that folks in RevOps are overworked and they have all these manual tasks like building Salesforce workflows, and they don't have enough people on their team, and they want to free themselves from a lot of the that manual work so they can do more strategic stuff. It's okay, that's probably a problem we're solving. How can we solve that? Well, give me something that creates my Salesforce flows for me instead of me needing to spend hours figuring it out myself. If that's the path that you take to get there, that's the way to show that RevOps is or that AI is solving problems for people in RevOps, but you can't skip that step. So for anyone who wants to kind of figure that out or look at that closely, those are the things that I would look at. Are in terms of where AI will impact folks in RevOps is like look at where they have the biggest problems and the biggest pain points today, and what are the solutions and how can AI help with that.
Great.